This Pauper deck I built 2 to 3 years ago, and it's still intact and I'm still having fun, and I'm to this day enjoying it, so I thought I would share it with the channel, and here's another installment of Think Outside the Deck Box. Thank you to Mr. Funnyman X for being responsible for me doing this video now. So let's look at the two commanders at first. We have here Gut True Soul Zealot, a legendary goblin shaman for 2 in a red. You get a 2/2, and whenever you attack you may sacrifice any other creature or an artifact, and if you do, you get a 4/1 black skeleton creature token with menace that is tapped and attacking, and you may choose a background. These are the skeletons you're creating, and these are menacing. And paired with Inspiring Leader, as long as your commander is on the field, all your token creatures have +2/+2, and the idea is that these skeletons become even more menacing now. So you have 3 skeletons with menace coming your opponent's way every turn, and you create more and more over the course of the game, beating your opponents down quite quickly. And as a Pauper deck, this is certainly quite terrifying to play against this deck, and what punch this deck can actually create or pack. So this deck is not just pure tokens and damage, it is part of the deck, but there is also a control pile here. We have tokens, we have damage, we also have some protection for our mostly commander, but some creatures as well. We don't want to have our skeletons die all the time. We have some removal cards here, as well as ramp and a card draw pile, and lastly a ramp pile. So let's look at the general structure of the deck first. We have token creator cards here. The Satyr's Cunning is one of my favorite token creators in Pauper. You create a 1/1 red satyr that cannot block, and it has escape. So for 2 in a red, you can cast it for its escape cost by exiling 2 other cards from your graveyard. We don't have much recursion from the graves, so we don't mind exiling cards, and most of the time it's just random cards we don't need anymore, and we can sacrifice those satyrs later for a skeleton, or these become 3/3s that still cannot block but still useful, and we can cast it over and over again. Very useful in my eyes. Dragon Fodder as well as Krenko's Command just create 2 red goblin tokens for 2 mana. Solid inclusion in my opinion. We have Raise the Alarm, the white version that creates 2 soldiers. Kuldotha Rebirth creates 3 tokens for just 1 mana, but you have to sacrifice an artifact, and this will be a recurring feature of this deck, meaning that we want to sacrifice our stuff, which is kind of weird and unique in Boros, that Boros wants to do that, creating black tokens, so it's kind of a Mardu deck. And this is what I really enjoy about this. It's not just stupid, just bashing your opponent, but like also having like some synergy and some cards that want to die, like the Doom Traveler or the Garrison Cat, that when they die create another token that you can also later sacrifice to get some skeleton out of them. Similarly, the Goblin Instigator and War Marshal create tokens when they die or when they come into play. So this one when it enters, this one when it enters and dies, and it has Echo, so if we don't want to pay, we just sacrifice it. But we can also sacrifice them for a skeleton token if we don't need them anymore. The Sire, I think it is, creates a 1/1 Myr token if it dies, so it just replaces itself, also for 2 mana. Then we have the Nimble Right schematic, I think it's in English, which creates a 1/1 construct when it enters or dies, and that is very useful in the sense that it just doesn't die to like attack and blocking, but it just lies there, and later on you can create another construct token by just sacrificing it and forcing it to be sacrificed, destroyed, and make some use of Gut's effect. Then we have the Worms Crossing Patrol, which is the strongest token creator in my opinion. For just 1 you get a 1/1, but it has Myriad, so for each opponent, there's a multiplayer card, you create a copy of the patrol here, and it has to be sacrificed or exiled at the end of the combat. But funnily enough, if you attack with the Crossing Patrol, you create your 3 creature copies, and then gut triggers, allowing you to sacrifice any one of the attacking tokens and create a attacking skeleton token for one of them. So you don't even have to sacrifice the original and are able to attack over and over again. Maybe the player you have a deal with, or the player that, well, doesn't have a blocker, or, well, you're able to protect it maybe with the protection cards. We'll see. We'll see in a second. But this is the idea of the token creations. We have some damage dealers here, just quickly glance over them. The Molten Gatekeeper, which is a newer one. So for 3, you get a 2/3, which whenever another creature enters under my control, I deal 1 damage to each opponent. Just solid damage dealer, and it has Unearth. For 1 turn we can get it out of our graveyard and get a skeleton out of them if we wanted to. Hissing Iguana has, whenever it dies or any other creature dies, you deal 1 damage to any target player or planeswalker. So not creatures, but players and planeswalkers. Useful way to have a source of damage and impact tremors. Everyone should know, whenever a creature enters under my control, I deal 1 damage to each opponent. And we have multiple creatures enter the battlefield throughout a turn, at least one with a skeleton, but normally we play another one. This one is very powerful with this effect. You have 1 creature attack and you create another 3 tokens which deal 1 damage to each opponent, and then you create a skeleton. So this goes up to like 4 creatures just with this synergy here. And keep in mind that tokens are also 3/3s with the Inspiring Leader. Now, I promised that this deck was quite unique, and this is a feature that I liked about this deck, is to include cards that take control of my opponent's creatures. So we are playing Pauper, so we don't have the power to include cards like Blightsteel Colossus, for example, and we actually have removal for it. So for example, we can play Mark of Mutiny on it for 3 to gain control of that creature and even put a +1/+1 counter on it, untap it, and it gains haste. Until end of turn, we gain control over it.
So what do you say? Are you with me? Mutiny.
So we would have to give it back, right? So we attack with Blightsteel maybe. If we can kill the last player with it, great. If we can't, we attack and actually sacrifice it for gut. They shuffle it into their owner's library, and we get a skeleton out of them. So this is also kind of functions as removal, but also as an option for us to take control over them and actually attack with them, maybe get an attack trigger from them if they have something useful. And this I really like, the kind of like mean side of red, of taking control of your strongest creature and being able to attack with it, get some upside from it. So there are several here. This one also scries instead of putting a counter on it, costs 4. This one I like because it only costs 1 red in this deck, because we will always have a skeleton with Menace. On the battlefield they have Menace, and it costs only 1 red to take control over a creature, so that is very powerful. Active Treason for 3, we take control over a creature. Hijack I like because it can also take control of artifacts, and we can sacrifice artifacts. If they have a powerful artifact that we want to get rid of, we just take control over it, maybe get some upside from them, and then sacrifice them for a skeleton and attack them with that. Wrangle, for just 2 you take control over most creatures with power 4 or less, and Cloud Shift actually lets us keep the creature. So what this actually does is we take control over a creature, and then as a second card at the end of turn, just before, we play Cloud Shift on the creature that we took control over. And what this card says is return that card to the battlefield under your control, and then we never have to give it back. So this I just liked to include. It can also save our commander, for example. It's very versatile in that sense, so that's the reason why Cloud Shift is so good. And with cards like taking control over a creature, you actually don't want to miss putting this card into the deck. Protection. Fanatical Devotion is a card that is, in my opinion, undervalued and unknown. It's a common from Nemesis. For 3 you get an enchantment, and you can sacrifice any creature to regenerate any other creature. So in the best case, we have a couple of tokens, maybe some goblins here or soldiers. We can sacrifice them for skeletons, but maybe someone wants to get rid of gut, and then we can just sacrifice one of the goblin soldiers, name it, and regenerate our gut. We can also in the worst case sacrifice a skeleton to save gut, but we can also sacrifice like the myriad tokens, for example, to save one of these skeletons. So this is very versatile in any token strategy decks, and white wants to play tokens, so yeah, consider this in your next token deck. And let me know if you knew this card. Then we have the root-borne defenses for 3. We populate, and then we have our creatures become indestructible. That includes our commander, includes our skeletons that might get blocked to death, and we hope to get some creatures removed from our opponents by having them block us. But this can also be played against a board wipe, so someone plays a damnation and, well, they're all indestructible, and we actually populate another skeleton for the next turn to deal even more damage. Do not underestimate the menace on the skeleton. No one wants to block a 6/3. Dust to Dust, one of my favorite cards from the Dark and in Pauper in general, just a 2-for-1 that removes 2 artifacts from your opponents. Very, very powerful card, so include that if you can find one in your collection, or, well, it's quite expensive, like $5 to $10. Then maybe wait for a reprint if you don't have one, but if you like old school cards, get them. Leave No Trace, also a very unknown card, but great in Pauper. For 2, you destroy an enchantment and each other enchantment that shares a color with it. So worst case scenario, we have to destroy something white and we have to destroy our Inspiring Leader as well. But all the other colors are free to be removed, and we destroy 1 Aristic Say, we destroy all the Aristic Says and every blue card that is on the board. So instant speed, very, very powerful. Underused in my opinion, and great card in Pauper. The Minimus Containment, for 3 we enchant any permanent card actually, and it becomes a treasure. So that's all that the creature or whatever permanent we enchant has now, and it can just be sacrificed. I wouldn't put it on a commander because they can just sack it and next turn just cast their commander, and they can actually use also the treasure mana for the commander tax. So keep that in mind when you play this card, but very useful. Generous Gift is now a Pauper card. You can destroy permanent and gift Elephant. Cleansing Wildfire destroys any land, and its controller puts a basic land onto the battlefield tapped, and you draw a card so it replaces itself. Useful removal against Chaos Cradle or any other useful utility lands, you name it. Abrade, just versatility, destroys probably a creature or an enchantment. Oblivion Ring, also versatile and can get rid of any permanent as long as this on the battlefield. Then we have the Crypt, which just gets rid of all the graveyards, and since we don't really play with graveyards, we don't mind as much. Always keep in mind all the artifacts that are in this deck we can sacrifice with Gut, so maybe there is no Muldrotha deck or any graveyard shenanigans deck on the battlefield, and you don't really need it to sacrifice it. Well, turn it into a skeleton next attack step. And also keep in mind, you don't have to attack with Gut, so whenever you attack, so any 1/1 creature is enough to attack. Like, you attack with a soldier, you want to turn into a skeleton anyways, it would die, but we sacrifice it before and turn it into a skeleton. Keep that in mind when you play this deck. These are things that might irritate at first because it's so unintuitive, but that is how the deck works. The Spell's Capsule, just to be able to destroy an artifact enchantment. If we don't need it, we turn it into a skeleton. This card is also quite versatile, gets you life. Most of the time I will not use it, but destroys enchantment or exiles a card from a graveyard. And this is a beautiful board wipe for 4. We deal 5 damage to each creature without flying. There are not many Pauper board wipes in red. There is another, like, Bloodfire Explosion or something it is, that I didn't include here. I didn't want to put too much emphasis on board wipes. Also, it's a Pauper deck. Also, we have a creature heavy focused deck, so we don't always want to wipe the board, but at least we want to include one. If your opponents also play creature heavy decks, maybe you want to include a second one or so. If you know any other Pauper red and white board wipe cards, also let us know in the comments below. Now, to our ramp cards, we have the prized statue that when it enters or dies gets us a treasure token, very useful. Sticky Fingers also gives us treasures whenever the enchanted creature that also gains menace deals combat damage to a player, even us. If at worst case we get hit by it, we get a treasure, and if it dies, we draw a card. So many upsides for this card for just 1 mana. I find it very useful, and most of the time we can strike a deal. Like, we give it manas, and you can just hit some opponents with it, and I get a treasure, you know? Like, always try to strike deals. Shiny Impetus also goads a creature and boosts it, so we don't even need a deal with that. They always have to attack someone, not us, and we get a treasure whenever they attack. It's stronger than the Sticky Fingers, but also costs 2 more. Cartographer, another creature that just simply ramps, and for a plains card, so we can even fetch dual lands, keep that in mind. And later on we can sack it for a skeleton. Impulsive Pilferer, similar, we can sacrifice it for a skeleton to get a treasure out of it, and it has Uncore, and we create actually a copy for each opponent of this Pilferer, and when it dies, which is at the beginning of the next end step latest, if we didn't turn it into a skeleton, we get our treasures. We're playing 2 of the ramp mirrors here that we're allowed to. We're playing the Arcane Signet, classic ramp cards, Mind Stone. I only have the red diamond here, could also include the white one, or can't if I don't wanna. Boros Signet, Everflowing Chalice, classic commander cards. Just stop the video if you don't know either or any of these. Commander Sphere, Lotus Petal, I really like to just propel myself 1 turn further, but I could also use it to create a skeleton. You get the idea. Wayfarer's Bauble, Walking Atlas, just to be able to ramp ahead a little more. Maybe this deck isn't the best to include it because we don't draw that many cards throughout the game. So always try to play this deck also not too aggressively by clearing out your whole hand, and then there's 1 board wipe that sets you back completely. Then you have no skeletons left and you just can play your commander and your background that just doesn't draw your cards. So keep that in mind when you play this deck. You always want to keep like 3 or 4 cards in your hand. Throughout the turn, just play 1 card or so and create more and more skeletons and make use of the cards that you have that you want to get rid of anyways. So the Walking Atlas might go and be replaced with any other card that would help us. And then we have Ashnod's Altar, which is just so great with all the tokens to be able to ramp ahead a little and get some more important cards out earlier. Maybe even reduce the commander tax. Now lastly, and I hope you enjoyed this video, before we hit into the lands pile, we have the card draw pile. Glimpse the Unthinkable, a beautiful impulse draw card which extends the top 3 cards, and this turn I can play them. If I don't, at the next end step I get 1/0/1 Eldrazi spawn token, which also ramps us for each card that I didn't play. So very useful again, and allows us to create more skeletons out of those Eldrazi's next turn. Another impulse draw. These are, I think, the same. Yeah.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give them. Okay.
They're the same picture.
They just printed them with a distance of 1 or 2 years to have the same effect here with just different names. So we exile the top 2 cards and we may play them until our next end step. So not this end step, but the next end step, the next turn's end step. So then we have 2 creatures, one has flying, and both of them allow us to, when they enter, draw a card and gain 1 life. Just solid cards, you know, and we can sack them for skeletons or hit them with a flyer. This is one of our few flyers in this deck. The implements are useful in the sense that we can either sack them for 1 damage or 2 life. They just lie there until we do that, or when they die, we actually also draw a card. So either we use their effects and we get them into the graveyard like that and we draw a card, or we sack them for a skeleton and then we don't get the effect, but we still draw a card. So useful in the sense of replacing themselves and creating us more skeletons. We have 2 Wellsprings here. One of them actually draws us cards, the other one gets us basic lands from our library whenever they enter or die. So 2 cards for 1 for each of them, and we can sack them for skeletons. Familia, just solid effects on a body. For 3 we get a 2/2 that gets us 2 life when it enters and replaces itself when it dies, for a skeleton probably. And Spectre here gets us a clue as well, and I really like the fact that they had a Thunder Junction token clue here that actually is a skeleton hand, so I wanted to have this one here for the deck, which is just flavorful. And we can actually sack it, the inspector, or the clue for a skeleton, or just draw a card from the clue as well. We have Trusty Pack Beast, which gets us back one of the cards from our graveyard, one artifact card. Very practical in the sense that we can get the important artifacts back that we want. All of these actually replace themselves, this one when entering, and these two when dying, with giving us back some artifacts. Now lastly, there are some interesting lands in this deck, so stick around. And if you actually watched this far into the video, why not just subscribe to this channel, support it? We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, like 170 actually, so we're having like a little countdown here. And yeah, thank you for doing that. Dwarven Mine, we have a mountain that enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 3 other mountains. And if it does enter untapped, this one actually gives us another token, another 1/1 dwarf token that we can sack with the skeleton. We're playing some cycling lands here, so all the Onslaught ones and all the Hour of Devastation ones. And these are just, if we have too many lands throughout the game, we can just cycle them and get rid of them. If not, we can just play them. These can easily be replaced, or at least those two if we want more untapped lands, but this is what I like to do. Then we have some lands that we can sack for gut. So all these artifact lands here actually allow us to also, if we have too much mana or not a creature that we can sack anymore, we can go to our lands and destroy those, sack them, and get a skeleton out of them. Keep that in mind, this is the reason why they are in here. Yes, they're a little more easily to be removed with cards like Vandal Blast, so keep that in mind as well when you include them, but that's why they are in here. We are going to our dual lands here. These 2 gates allow us to tap for 2 colors. One of them, whenever we tap them, this one just gives us a life point as well, enters tapped. Command Tower, you all know it. Pauper dual lands, these are auto-include in any Pauper deck in my opinion. They can be fetched with cards like the Core that we saw earlier, the white one, the Cartographer here, and because it says it's just a Plains card, not a basic Plains, keep that in mind when playing that. If you need an untapped Plains, obviously get the Plains. And then we're playing those 2 general fetch lands, if you want to call them that, or replace them with basic lands if you don't like to have that many tapped lands. Then we're lastly playing 7 plains and 8 mountains, and I really like these artworks. But now I do want to hear from you, which cards would you have included in a Gut, the Inspiring Leader deck? Let us know in the comments below. Obviously, as always, you can find the deck list in the description below. Again, this is my first Pauper EDH deck, and I really liked it, like the way it feels to play this deck, and the fact that it's just not classical Boros beating, but also like the shenanigans that you can do with taking control over creatures, and also the sacrifice mechanics that we all love from the color black as well. Now I bid you to bring a friend to Magic, click those 2 buttons to support the channel, be kind to the people around you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!